So we've been waiting a long time to see the left face some accountability and get checked. We're also waiting for Big Pharma and Fauci to be held liable. According to Vigilante News Network, the Italian health minister under investigation for murder for concealing COVID-19 vaccine deaths, that he is under investigation. And InfoWars reporter Greg Reese provided an English translation of a German broadcast about the story, saying that the Rome Public Prosecutor's Office is investigating Roberto Speranza, the Italian government's health minister, during the time of COVID measures. That's because internal emails revealed that he and the head of the AIFA had been aware of the dangers of the COVID vaccination from the start. The accusation is that the responsible minister and the head of the drug authority knowingly and deliberately exposed the unsuspecting Italian population to risk. Now, here to weigh in on this and much more is Dr. Peter McCullough, an internist, cardiologist, epidemiologist. He's been sounding the alarm about the danger of vaccines and advocating for early treatment methods from the beginning. He's testified multiple times in the U.S. Senate, European Parliament, and more, and is considered to be among the world's experts on COVID-19. So welcome to the Counter Narrative, Dr. Peter McCullough. I feel like I'm talking so fast because I just know I have so much that I want to cover. But you heard, so keep up, folks. Oh gosh, I hope nobody's playing me on two times the speed. But anyways, you saw that last article about the Italian minister being under investigation. Certainly Fauci should be at this point, right?
He should be. You know what they have in Italy is they have the emails. So the emails indicate, wow, people are dying after the vaccine, and it looks like an intentional cover-up. And I imagine the same will come out if we can ultimately get to all the communications between the CDC, the NIH, and the FDA. Remember, Pfizer knew about 1,223 deaths within 90 days of release of their vaccine on December 11th, 2020. This is a large number of people dying. It was, I think, fewer than 1,000 who died with the Ford Pinto Mercury Bobcat disaster. And it caused, Ford to pull all the cars off the market. Here, Pfizer should have been pulled off the market immediately when people started to die. Now this is coming out everywhere. I'm glad the Italians are pursuing this. Clearly, the government agencies worked with pharma to cover this up.
Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because you mentioned all the people dying and evidence of that. Steve Kirsch recently had a Substack saying that Medicare death data confirms the COVID vaccines are killing people. So there's no more doubts. And it's the same anomaly in 5 countries. So the thing I wanted to ask you about that is, with all this evidence continuing to pour out, how can other doctors just continue to ignore this?
The doctors have all taken the vaccine. So it's like having a bunch of doctors who took Vioxx saying, oh, there's no problem with Vioxx. They've all had it. They've all taken the vaccine. The doctors can't possibly bring themselves to admit that there's a problem with the vaccine when they've taken it themselves. They've encouraged their family members. They forced it on their patients. Their health systems have forced it on the entire faculty and nurses and students. That's the problem we have, is the doctors are too deep into this. You're right. The CDC is recording now over 18,000 Americans that have died after the shot. By doctors report that to the CDC, like me. I've had a patient die of the vaccine, and the underreporting number on that's about 30. So we're probably coming up on 600,000 Americans who have died after the vaccine. Of the 18,000 the CDC know about, Kristi, 1,150 have died on the same day they took the shot. Recently, the Japanese Ministry of Health and Welfare reported the same thing. They didn't have all the deaths, but they had people, particularly seniors, dying on the same day they take the shots. Remember, the vaccines code for the lethal part of the virus, the spike protein. So it's not surprising that someone would, get too much spike protein and it would be lethal. Now we have an analysis from Dennis Rancourt out of Montreal. About 17 million people worldwide, ecological analysis suggests, have died of the COVID-19 vaccines. The biggest biological product safety disaster in all of human history.
Wow. And I mentioned Steve Kirsch's Substack, and you also have an extremely informative Substack. Your latest article is making a big claim. You're saying that medical evidence is showing risk of fetal loss that skyrockets after injection. And that's completely opposite of what factcheck.org is claiming. So can you explain how they're getting away with saying the opposite of what medical evidence is showing? Do they have any evidence of their own to say the otherwise?
We traced, factcheck.org is a branch of the Annenberg Foundation. They're directly funded by Gates. Gates Foundation is part of the biopharmaceutical complex. They're one of the biggest, vaccine syndicate members that exist right now. Very powerful. So factcheck.org is an extension of the Gates Foundation. And they're not just checking facts, they're actually making false claims. So we caught factcheck.org claiming that a pregnant woman would actually prevent a stillbirth if she took a COVID-19 vaccine. That's just the opposite. We know the COVID-19 vaccines cause fever. Fever can precipitate a stillbirth or a premature delivery for sure. We know the vaccines, in a paper by Thorpe and colleague, increase the risk of fetal loss through miscarriage manyfold, as well as fetal abnormalities, maternal and fetal hemorrhage. So factcheck.org is actually making false pharmaceutical claims in the most outrageous manner, that taking a COVID shot would prevent a stillbirth.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, just the way that censorship and everything is now that they have that fact check, if you try and say the evidence that shows it's the opposite, then you'd probably be the one shut down. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. But as we're talking about birth and pregnancy, there's so many lies surrounding that people have now discovered. I've had Dr. Stu on before. I think you might know who he is. He advocates for natural birth and midwifery. And he was just talking about how all the interventions that they pushed over the years is also what can cause stillbirth. And that actually, I was after 40 weeks. My baby came after 40 weeks, and I'm over 40. So I mean, according to mainstream, this baby should have never survived. But the evidence shows that there's more stillbirths between like 37 and 39 weeks. And this is when women are encouraged to get inductions and things like that. A little bit off topic, but it just has us looking at everything differently. The other big thing that's coming out of this is more parents like myself are hesitant to even get any vaccines with their babies. And I know you had a comment about that because we were talking about that just before.
Well, yeah, you were absolutely a wonderful mother, beautiful mother when you're pregnant, and God bless your family, and you're doing so well together. And you take a natural approach. I can tell you, as a medical doctor, I see pregnant women in consultation. I've been an internist and cardiologist for decades. The one disturbing trend is actually vaccinating women for anything. Right now, women receive diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, and the inactivated influenza vaccine, none of which are needed. None of those diseases are threats to pregnant women. And what can happen is any vaccine can provoke a fever. And a fever is the most common stimulus for the woman to lose the baby. So we don't want to provoke a fever with vaccines. Now, the ACIP panel, the CDC, FDA, they've actually approved and introduced respiratory syncytial virus vaccine in third trimester mothers, not to protect the mother, but to theoretically protect the baby. We've never done this before. I think it's extremely risky. And what pregnant women should understand is pregnancy is a natural state. It's an immune resistant state. It's not an immunodeficiency state. Pregnant women have greater defenses against illnesses than non-pregnant women. And what we've learned over time now is natural is best. And the World Council for Health recently has issued a statement guidance in September of 2023. Remember, World Council for Health is kind of like an alternative to the WHO, stating that mothers and children should consider a wait-and-see approach for the entire vaccine schedule. Since the COVID-19 vaccines have been put on the routine childhood vaccine schedule, it makes the entire schedule unsafe, and we don't have clear and present threats from any of these illnesses right now. 5 studies demonstrate that going natural, that is skipping all the childhood vaccines, the children have better outcomes. They have fewer rates of asthma, allergic dermatitis, infectious problems like otitis media, lower rates of neuropsychiatric syndromes, and it's probably better now to go natural.
Yeah, and it's good to hear and just have that confirmation. I mean, and breast is best. I'm doing the nursing. I even did some colostrum harvesting. I'm trying to do everything I can that is natural, that God gave us, to keep my baby healthy and away from any of these issues that could come up. But we were talking about, the factcheck.org getting away with essentially just flat out lying. There's still so much censorship going on about anything vaccine related. A strange thing happened at the last GOP debate. I'm sure you've seen it. Let's watch that again and see what happens when this topic gets brought up. If we could play that.
Competitive marketplace begins. That's crony capitalism, and that's the answer.
Okay, through Operation Warp Speed, the Trump administration and private industry developed a COVID vaccine in record time.
Screen froze, then went black. Some buzzkill music until it came back. So let's get out of that. So there you go. Screen went black. It didn't come back. Others have posted what actually was being talked about. And essentially, Vivek was talking about the vaccine liability under Reagan and how he, if he is elected president, would repeal that vaccine liability. Any thoughts on why they didn't want that being discussed and on air?
This is stunning and unprecedented. Presidential debates are supposed to be a public forum for us to evaluate the candidates. This was News Nation doing this. And as you know, it's not exactly live. So there is an advanced feed. And this shows that there must have been government agencies or pharmaceutical companies or somebody on the advanced feed that actually, once he started talking, they censored out 8 minutes of a candidate's response. And he said he simply would work to repeal the vaccine liability immunity that they have from the 1986 act that was passed under President Reagan. This goes to show you that we have real-time live censorship going on of everything that's coming out to Americans. And it's so important to turn to independent sources of media like this, like your show, The Counter Narrative. Couldn't be a better title for this show, to get the truth, because you can't even get the truth turning into a presidential debate, because there are elements of what we call this biopharmaceutical complex. In our book, we define this very powerful vaccine syndicate. Anything that goes against the vaccine narrative now is automatically censored out. On my show tonight, we have a demonstration with ChatGPT, which is now AI. It's artificial intelligence. ChatGPT is essentially a government propaganda weapon. So if you were to ask ChatGPT how many people have died after the vaccine, the first thing that ChatGPT tells you is the vaccines are safe and effective.
Oh my gosh. So I mean, our AI systems are parroting the same crud that we've had to hear over and over again. There are some actions being taken. Obviously, the heat is turning up. There's more studies showing what bringing evidence of what we've been saying all along. I know the Texas Attorney General is going after the companies. And so there's all these things happening. Do you feel like we will finally see some accountability in some form for these vaccine makers?
The cracks are on the wall. The Ken Paxton Attorney General case against Pfizer is leveraging what's called the long arm of Texas law, meaning that any company that does business in Texas can be sued by the Attorney General. And Paxton's alleging that Pfizer has violated deceptive trade practices. They haven't come clean on safety and efficacy. Their PR marketing firm, Weber Shandwick, is clearly involved as well. And through discovery, Pfizer will probably very much get fried on this. Normally Pfizer just settles these AG cases, and they've settled for wrongdoing, false promotion, advertising over and over again. But you have this case going on, the Italian investigation. We've just had testimony in the British Parliament. I was one of the people who testified remotely. European Parliament. We have activity going on over in Asia. We've seen multiple companies now and countries becoming completely fed up with the WHO. And we've heard the Philippines, New Zealand, Slovakia pulling out of the World Health Organization, a prominent member of this vaccine cartel. People have had their fill of vaccines. They want to get to the truth on what happened. Fortunately, very few Americans are taking any more of these. And Kristi, in Texas now, vaccine mandates are completely banned by employers.
It's so encouraging that these action steps have been taken, all while they're trying. The CDC director is now coming back saying, calling for masks to come back, calling for all these measures to come back, even though evidence has come out that none of those measures did anything. So do you think that they're priming us for another go at a worse pandemic?
We've seen a couple attempts now of, in a sense, taking a manufactured story and trying to promote this fear vaccine agenda. The clearest example is monkeypox. Monkeypox in the summer of 2022 is national public health emergency. Biden got out there and said it. Everyone had to take a vaccine. And we got ahead of this in the media. I went on Fox News multiple times, Newsmax, settled down the country on this. We had an approach. It was treatable. There were therapeutics. People didn't need a vaccine. And then it never got any traction as it kind of evolved into more of a sexually transmitted disease. And then the Biden administration drops this the end of January. Suddenly there's no more monkeypox emergency. They tried really hard with a fall outbreak of XBB 1.5, but it wasn't 1.5. It turned out that fizzled out. It was FL 1.5 and EG5 and HV. It was a very minimal COVID outbreak, and it fizzled. In the state of Texas, Kristi, we've had 92,000 COVID deaths. I recently checked this for a statement. And, that's dying of or with COVID. We have about 29 million people in the state. Do you know how many people died of that definition of COVID in 2023? It was only 1,500. And again, It's overcoding like crazy. There's virtually no threat of COVID out there. Americans know it. We've been back to business now for several years. And I think what's working is this is a war in the media. This is a war of information. In fact, the best named show is InfoWars. And Alex Jones is back on Twitter.
Yes, and we have a host coming up in the next segment from InfoWars. So obviously, we're friends of the show, and I mean he picked the perfect name. That's exactly what we're in right now, is an InfoWar, and it does seem like the tide is turning. Like you said, Alex is back on Twitter, and it's been exciting to see him dispel the lies about him. But you did mention, though, speaking of Twitter, and the WHO, which you mentioned, the World Council on Health was asking for support and rejecting WHO amendments. And, there was a lot of talk on InfoWars when I've guest hosted on there before as well about this scary pandemic treaty that the WHO was trying to get in it. I think with the UN and all of this. Do you know where that stands? And I was curious because I didn't know myself, like, is that what they're talking about in rejecting the WHO amendments? Is that related to the pandemic treaty? Okay.
It's true. The WHO plays a really key role in this biopharmaceutical complex we write about. WHO is not elected. It's an NGO. Its head, Tedros, is not even a doctor. They're heavily funded by the Gates Foundation and the Chinese Communist Party. The WHO, in its Pandemic Treaty Alliance and international health regulations, aspires to have complete dominion over all plants, animals, and humans. What I mean by this is they get to call the shots on livestock and fertilizer and food quotas. They get to call the shots on various farming techniques, climate, whether or not there's a climate emergency, pollution emissions, and they get to call all the shots on human health, whether or not there's a pandemic, if we have to do worldwide mass vaccination, testing, wear masks. The WHO would control all this, binding by international law. And I can tell you as a doctor, the WHO doesn't provide anything for me, zero. And if the WHO went away tomorrow, we'd be better off. And now multiple countries are pulling out of the WHO. Former President Trump, candidate Trump, has said very clearly he would pull us out of the WHO. I think it's the right move. We do not need to be bound up in international court according to WHO's aspirations on what they want to do with global health. They're simply not qualified. They're not going to help us in any way. And it's a giant attempt at a power grab. And let's see what happens. But I've written my representative here in Dallas, Colin Allred, and he responded back to me saying he fully supports the WHO. And so the Biden administration and the Democrats fully support the WHO. I hope this becomes an issue that can be brought up as a presidential election issue, because I think it's important.
If they will allow that to air, if they allow it, will
Right.
allow us to see that. I wanted to ask you about just your personal life, going through this whole thing. I mean, you were an esteemed cardiologist. You still are an esteemed cardiologist, but you were most heavily cited, and Baylor University would have bragged on you. Now you've had all these like litigation issues. You've had a personal journey. You went from saying elderly should get this shot to now saying there are that these people, these vaccine makers, the globalists, the elites, that they intentionally wanted us sick. So that's a big leap to go from this shot should be taken by immunocompromised folks and to all of a sudden saying, you know what, they intentionally wanted us sick. So take me through that journey. Do you think it's been hearing personal stories, just looking at the data? What's been the biggest influence in your journey?
I look back on it. Fortunately, I made the right calls. I was the only public figure, Kristi, the only one who published questioning the vaccines in August of 2020 before they came out. And I published it in The Hill. I was a regular contributor with Scott Atlas during the first year of the pandemic. I was the only person to say that it was a gamble to develop these vaccines. Now, in research and development in 2020, I was co-leading the vaccine program by a company called Imodulon. So I wasn't against COVID vaccines, but we had proposed vaccinating seniors in nursing homes, nursing home workers, about 2.7 million. Now that program never got funded. But when the genetic vaccines came out, Pfizer, Moderna, I never supported them. I never said anybody should get them. I was clear. I went on Fox News immediately and I said, definitely people under 50 should not take them. And, I held my ground. My patients never were advised to take the vaccines. Fortunately, many didn't. And so I'm going to be on the right side of history in terms of the vaccines. But I have undergone a personal journey where you're right. I was in the medical orthodoxy. I've lost 2 jobs. I'm now in complete independent practice. I'm very independently, academically active. I'm one of the most published people in COVID in the world, over 70 peer-reviewed publications. And I'm proud of the fact that I've published the first multi-drug treatment protocol to treat COVID that became the worldwide standard, the McCullough protocol. Now I've published the first detoxification protocol for what people should do if they've taken a vaccine or had multiple episodes of COVID. Those will probably be the 2 most valuable, widely implemented medical interventions in medical history. It'll be far more important than the vaccines or any of these other interventions, because it's addressed the big unmet needs. What to do about acute COVID, and now what to do after mass vaccination.
Well, we can't thank you enough for that protocol, for your integrity, your bravery. It's been so inspiring to see. And now you have such a legacy to leave with that, as well as your book and your Substack, putting out information all the time. So I really encourage people to stay up with you on that. And if they want to get the protocols for detoxification or anything, where should they go?
Go to petermcculloughmd.com. That'll take you to McCullough protocol, what's called base spike detoxification. Fortunately, it's with natural products you can get over the counter. We've tested all the prescription drugs and they don't seem to work as the primary base. But now this has met peer review. It's been cited in the National Library of Medicine. And most people are moving to this. It takes 3 substances, nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin in combination, probably for 3, 6, 12 months plus. But people are under direct observation in my practice. They are getting better. We've held some large calls among doctors worldwide. Takes a long time, but ultimately we believe actually clearing the body of spike protein using these degradative enzymes, anti-inflammatories, really makes a difference. The prescription drugs can't get the spike protein out of the body. Everybody who's had COVID and everybody who's taken the vaccine has some of the Wuhan spike protein in their body. And now the issue is we need to assist the body in clearing this out so we can move on to better health.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm so proud to call you a friend. It certainly seems like God's hand is on your life with all of your accomplishments, everything that you continue to contribute to this movement. And we just can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. And we look forward to having you back.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, up next, we were talking about it before, and this is an information war. And so